You are listening to Living Out Loud broadcast segment of In the Chair with Pastor L. I am your host, Pastor Laresha Kane. There are so many negative things that are going on in our world on a daily basis that can affect how we view life. But on this show, we bring encouragement and inspiration to our listening audience. We spotlight authors, ministries, entrepreneurs, CDs, and much more who are making a positive change in this world. Well, today in our co-host chair, we have Lakisha Louissiant. Lakisha Louissiant, she is an author of Tears of Silence, inspirational speaker, philanthropist, and autism advocate. As an advocate, she focuses on the importance of child and parent advocacy for those with different abilities while equipping them with a power package of knowledge by way of teaching them the importance of documentation and knowing their rights. Well, I am so glad to have her on today. I am not going to prolong our time together. Hello, Lakisha.
I am great. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. I'm doing wonderful. I just couldn't wait to connect with you on today. I know that God has so many great things that He wants us to know that you're going to bring to us. As we had this conversation before, that I don't know a whole lot about autism. And as I begin to do research, there's so much information out there, but even there have been different people on Facebook and different social networking sites that have been talking about autism. But before we jump into what is autism, we know that you have a child that is autistic. When you were pregnant, were there any signs or indication that your child had a disability?
There were no signs at all. All of the testings they do, the blood work, everything came back normal. So there was no clue that I was carrying a child that was going to be born with autism. I had no clue at all. Whereas to previously, with my first pregnancy, the test came back positive for Down syndrome with my first child, but he came back 95% that he would be normal, and he was just fine. So I had the signs with the first pregnancy, but with the second one, there was no signs at all, so it was a surprise to me.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you have two sons, and the first one, they said that he was going to have Down syndrome, but he didn't. So you're preparing for this, your second pregnancy, and believing God for a healthy pregnancy. When did you notice that there was something different?
He was about 2, almost 3, and we were sitting in the living room, and back in the day you could take a spoon or something and hit it on the bottom of a pan, and of course you would get a reaction from a child. And he was standing there in front of the television, and we're calling his name, no response. So I took a spoon and I hit the bottom of a pan, and there was no response. So in my mind, I was assuming, okay, is my child deaf? So that's when we proceeded to go to the doctors to have tests. The tests are based upon the brain waves. And once tests were done, we were able to notice that he wasn't deaf, he could hear, and everything came back as normal. But now after that, it was trying to figure out what caused him to be that way, and he was that way for a long time.
When you went to the doctor, what was the medical diagnosis that they gave?
He could hear, but once we went back to the doctors, I think it may have been a couple of months later, and we took him to a neurologist, that's when they diagnosed him with autism, and they also diagnosed him with epilepsy. And you hear of the word epilepsy or the word seizure, and you don't know exactly what it is if you've never seen it before. And once he was tested, we realized that's what was going on. He was having seizures, and the seizures were causing a delay in his response. So seizures were having a very big impact on, I guess you could say, his response, the response time for responding to an action or someone calling his name. And so it caused a delay.
As a mother, and I have 3 sons, I can't imagine what you must have felt, what you went through. How did you feel? And I know that someone may be saying, that don't even make sense to ask her that question. But I want to know, how did you feel when you were going through the test and the diagnosis came back? How did you feel about what they said?
Okay. And first I would like to say that's a perfectly good answer, because a lot of people don't understand, a good question, because people don't understand as far as what parents go through. I went through a stage of just being angry with God. I went through a stage where I cried all of the time. I couldn't get any sleep because I was scared if I went to sleep he would have a seizure and I wouldn't be able to catch it. It was a lot. It was frustrating. I questioned God many times, why my child? What did I do so bad? And all of these different things. I went through depression that I never thought I would have been able to come out of. So there's a lot of stages of anger that people go through when they have a child like that. You're taking your child to be tested, especially when they're placing all of these little gadgets on their head and you're having to hold them down, and you're holding them down because you're needing answers for something, but at the same time they're not understanding it, so they're screaming and crying. And so it's just a lot I went through dealing with it.
I'm glad that you answered it that way and explained it, because I think sometimes we're so concerned about the child and what the child is going through that we're not even in touch or aware with our own emotions, our own feelings. So I'm glad that you were able to get in touch with your own feelings and emotions. You said something in your answer. You said you felt like it was your own fault. Why would you feel like or believe that it could be your fault that your child has autism and epilepsy?
Because the world has formed a very big opinion that has an impact on everyone, or possibly a lot of people who deal with things like this. They'll say, you did something wrong for your child to be that way. How is it that your child is this way? What did you do? And so growing up around that type of, opinion, it has a weight on you. It starts to make you think, okay, did I do something wrong? Because, not everybody's child in this world is born with a disability. And you look at yourself like, okay, wait a minute. How did this happen to me, but it didn't happen to someone else? So you go through those stages of, questioning yourself because of something someone has told you in the past. And people don't realize their words have a very big impact on others. And I just thought it was my fault. And I felt that way for years. I mean, years I felt like it was my fault, until I happened to run across a scripture where someone in the Bible asked, well, why is this child that way? And they said, is it something that the parent did? And then the person responded, no, it was for God to show his glory in their lives. And it was maybe when he was 10 years old that I realized that. It wasn't my fault.
That's beautiful that you have, come to learn and to know for yourself that it's not your fault, and we in the world sometimes can be very judgmental and blame people. Well, did she use drugs or what was she doing? Or, maybe God put a curse on it, just stuff. We hear all kinds of things. So I'm glad he was able to show you that in the Word of God. For those that may not understand what autism is, can you give us the clinical definition, or in your own words, what is autism?
Well, autism, for the clinical definition, is a neurological disorder that is characterized by communication difficulties, expressive and receptive sensory problems, and socialization issues. Usually appears between 16 months and 2 years of age. And so that's the clinical definition of autism. My definition of autism would basically be a child that has problems in areas of social communication with others, or understanding things in the way that we do. I just think they are a group of, I think children who have autism is a group of kids who learn differently and who process information differently than we do. So I wouldn't consider them having a disability. I just think they just have a different way of dealing with things, and because we don't understand it, we think it's a disability when it's really not.
Well, you just said, how old is your son now?
He's 14.
You said that kids that are autistic, they learn differently. Can you shed some light on having a child that's autistic and one that's not? How did he learn differently? And I know all children learn different than the other. I have 3 sons, and all 3 of them are different in every sense of the word. But can you shed light on how he learned things differently than maybe someone else?
Okay, like, for instance, if I show you how to add 1 + 1, and I show you on your fingers, okay, you hold up one finger and then you hold up another. Now 1 + 1 = 2. If I was to show him that in that way, it would confuse him in a sense. So instead of using fingers or different things like that, I'll use manipulatives, little balls or squares, a little manipulatives that you can use to help them. And you put it there and you tell it to them in a story form. And it's kind of like where he's 14, I would teach him as though he was in the kindergarten. He was a kindergartner. And he loves numbers. So for history, if you say something about 1925, this happened, he catches on to it so quick. And all he memorizes is the number. If you say the number, he can tell you exactly what happened on that day. Whereas to me, I would have to study what happened on that day and try to remember the date. It's kind of backwards how they learn. He's very, very, very smart. It's just channeling in on the way he processes his information. And it's kind of difficult to explain, but once you see him, like we were talking about plant cells or animal cells one day. I couldn't get him to learn it in the way I wanted him to learn it, so I compared it to my dog. What do you think is on the inside of Goose? And he said, I don't know. And I said, okay, well, let's see. And once I said Goose, I had his attention. It's using things they like. And if you can use something they like, oh, you would be so surprised at how much they know. Very surprised.
That's beautiful. I'm glad that you explained it. Because I think, or my perception of things would be, hey, maybe he can't learn a specific kind of way, or he can't learn at all. Because I'm pretty sure that you were told maybe he wouldn't be able to learn,
Yes.
And you being the mother that you are, you're like, no, that's not so. My child, he's going to learn, and he will learn, and he's smart. I would like to ask you, how is his relationship with his brother?
When they were younger, it was a great relationship. They had a very good relationship, and I think now that my oldest son, he's gotten older, he wants to fit in with other people, and he doesn't always want to be home with his brother. So I think they're right now, just like any other brother and sister, they have their times where they're close at one point and then they start straying away because one wants to go one direction and another wants to do another. Like my son likes to sit in the room and play with Play-Doh. And my oldest son, he wants to play basketball. So trying to get both of them in the room at the same time to do things is kind of difficult. And my son is the oldest one he's dealing with, what my son is going through. He's grieving over it as well, and people don't understand that siblings actually grieve. And I remember when he was 3 all the way till he was maybe 10 or 11 years old, every night he would cry and say, why can't my brother talk to me? And I didn't have the answer for him, so all I could say was, baby, just pray and pray to God and ask God to help your brother talk, and he'll talk. And I just kept encouraging him, but at the same time, I'm trying to encourage myself. He's going to talk. He's going to talk one day. And so when he finally started talking, it helped them a whole lot better. They were able to communicate a lot more. But they're just like any other sibling. They have their days. He doesn't baby him at all. We treat him as though he is typically normal, whatever normal is. We treat him as though he is just like anyone else. So he doesn't baby him. We don't like to do that because we don't want to handicap him any worse than what he is.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I love it. You gave us so much information, and I'm glad you did. You talked about their relationship, and I think it's good to bring that out because it affects everyone in the household. It affects their relationships. And when you said that your oldest son was grieving because his brother couldn't talk, I never thought of it. Never would have thought of that. That there's a grieving process. So if your 3-year-old, he grieved, did you go through a grieving process as well?
Oh, yes, I did. I just came out of my grieving process, to be honest with you. It's been about 2 years now, a little over 2 years. So it took me a long, 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 long time to accept what is going on with my child. It really does, and I don't think there's any one parent that can tell you the minute the doctor tells them, okay, this is what's wrong with your child, that they're happy and say, okay, yes, I'm excited, let's take him home. No, when they get home and they start to watch other children who are in their child's same age range doing things that their child can't do, that's hurtful to the parent. That parent goes through that phase of why for a long time, and it's not until they accept that they're grieving that they understand that's really what's going on. We really actually think we're just questioning God, but we're not even realizing that we're grieving until it's brought to our attention. This is what's going on with you right now. You're hurting and you're grieving. It's kind of like the death of the dream of having your perfect little child. That's exactly what it is.
Oh, wow. In your grieving process, because I know, that people grieve differently and it affects them differently, how did it affect you, maybe mentally, spiritually, physically? How did it affect you going through that grieving process?
By the time I was 23 years old, I had ulcers in my stomach. I was going through migraines, and that was along with other things that went on. But once I had my son, it seems as though it got worse. I was mad at God. There's no need of not being honest about it. I was mad with God for a long time. I couldn't understand, why he did that to me. So spiritually, it made me doubt a lot of things. It kind of, instead of making my faith stronger in God, it weakened it. Because I was praying and saying, God, help my child. Help him. I know you can do this. I know you can do that. Show me a miracle. And then the miracle never came. And so imagine waiting years and years and years, and you never get that miracle. And you're still laying there, you're crying, and you're saying, I don't understand why this isn't happening. Once my son started to speak, that strengthened my faith like never before, because now I knew God could do anything. And so I still to this day believe for him, anything is possible for him.
I know when I was talking to you, you had a saying that you say, because I had the opportunity to meet and speak with a young lady. Her name is Michelle Fisher-Gilmore, and she's bipolar. And she says, I have bipolar, but bipolar doesn't have me. So in our time of talking, you had said something, a little phrase that you used for your son. Can you share that with us, in the listening audience?
I always tell my son that he does not have autism. He has doism. And that means he can do anything through Christ who strengthens him. There's nothing too hard for him to do. So I don't allow him to hear me say that he has autism because he doesn't have autism. In my mind, and I'm going to continue to say that regardless of what the diagnosis is, he has doism. He can do anything. And if you can trick a child's mind to think they can do anything, oh my goodness, the things that they can do will just be unbelievable. You'll find them doing everything then. Oh, I can do this. But as long as you tell them they can't do it, they won't do it.
Well, listening audience, today you are in the chair with Pastor L, and our co-host today is the one and only fabulous Lakisha Louissiant, and we are talking about autism. I'm telling you, this is a topic that we have to talk about because there's so many of us in this world that don't know anything about it, and sometimes we judge things according to how we see them, how we view them, and I think awareness is the key. And who's best to talk about it but this lady here in the co-host chair, Lakisha Louissiant. She is a phenomenal woman of God, so I'm glad to have you on the show. You said something, oh my God. You were talking about speaking, I'm going to use it this way, speaking positive words instead of, saying he has doism, speaking positive words, speaking life. As a mother, and a lot of parents don't understand this, it is so vital and important, it is so important that we speak life into our children because we see what happens when we don't. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. And you are telling your child, your son, that he can do anything he wants to do. Now, by you confessing that and him confessing that, have you seen considerable change in him since you've been confessing that over his life?
Yes. This is a young man, 14 years old, just now learning how to read. So once I told him he didn't have autism, he can do anything he wants to do. Every single night, he grabs the Bible. He says, I have to read the Bible. I don't want to disappoint God. I need to pray. So he leads us into Bible study every single night. So you're talking about a child that's 14, who's just now learning how to read, and being told by teachers that he could not do it. He's picking up a Bible, reading words in the Bible, words like descendants, and all of the different words in the Bible. He's using words. He's reading to us every night, and every single night he reads a little faster, a little faster. He reads a little faster, and it excites me because I remember him reading like in the beginning, and so now he's saying in the beginning. And it's amazing how powerful our words are when we tell them that they can do something. He takes anything now. His brother loves to draw, and he's one of the best artists, I have to say, for my child. But now he sees that his brother can draw people to look just like themselves. Now he attempts to draw. So now he thinks he's the best artist because I never tell him that he can't do anything. And that's where I think parents hinder their children's growth, especially children who have different abilities. Because whenever people used to talk to him and they would try to talk and they would try to talk to him and he would jibber jabber. And I would say, I'm sorry, he can't talk. I found myself saying that for years because my eyes and my ears hurt. Okay, well the only thing he can do is jibber jabber. But now I stopped saying he can't talk, and I started saying he can talk, he's still learning. Once I started saying that, oh, my God, the words that were coming out of that little boy's mouth shocked me. I would look over at him and say, well, where did that word come from? And even people now, if they're speaking to him, he'll say intelligent words. He'll say big words to them, and he'll look at them and say, well, are you insecure? And they expect because he has autism not to know what insecure is. Because when he says a big word, he says, Mama, what does that word mean? And then I'll tell him what the word means. And once I tell him, it never leaves his mind. So he can speak and have a conversation with a person, and they will look at him and say, well, wait a minute, I thought he couldn't read. Where did that word come from? You're using such big words. Because they're limiting what he can do instead of giving him space to just grow and just not even placing him inside of a matchbox as they do all children with autism.
Mm-hmm. Before I go into my next question, while you were talking, this came to me, and I have to ask, by you saying, he can't talk and all of these different things, did your son ever, because some kids do, take advantage of that? And I won't say manipulate, so that's such a strong word, but take advantage of his autism.
Yes, he did. Oh, my goodness. And it is manipulation. That's exactly what he did. He realized, so this is how I get my mama to respond. If he wanted something to eat and he was hungry, he couldn't tell me he was hungry at the moment, so we're playing this guessing game. All of a sudden, he would just lay out on the floor and scream and kick and cry, and for like 20 and 30 minutes, so I figured out what was going on. Until I taught him how to take me by my hand and pull me to wherever it is he wanted to go. I fed him for years, and one day my husband said, you have got to stop doing this. He can feed himself. He didn't want to feed himself in the beginning because he was so used to me doing it. But then I had to step away and say, okay, I have to let him try. Eventually, he's feeding himself, and he can fix his own food. He can go in the kitchen and fix his own sandwich. But he took advantage of that. Oh, yes, he manipulated me big time. They're really smart. They know how to use their different ability to get what they want. And if you let them, then what you're doing is you're hindering them from growing and learning how to take care of themselves, because one day mama's not going to be there. Then who's going to be there to have to learn how to deal with this thing that they've learned for so long? So you have to break the manipulation they do. You have to start breaking it. Yes, it hurts, but it's a battle. It is a very big battle. I've had my hair pulled out from those battles of saying, no, you're not going to do this. You understand what you're doing. I have to tell my child that. He'll cry, just like, for instance, on yesterday, he wanted Apple Jacks. This is all he's been eating for years. Every morning he wakes up, washes his face, brushes his teeth, fixes his bowl of Apple Jacks, and goes to his room and eat. That's his routine. Apple Jacks weren't here, but Fruit Loops were here. He didn't want that. So he carried on for about 20 or 30 minutes, and I sat him down at the table, and I said, you know what you're doing. You're not crazy. You're very smart. You're being manipulative. Now, you can eat this, or you can go in your room and not eat. Which one do you want to choose? Once he realized I stuck to my guns for 20 long minutes, oh, Lord, he finally said, okay, I'll eat this. But if you continue to let them do that, oh, my God, they will continue. They'll do it forever. They will manipulate their parents for the rest of their lives.
Ooh, I'm so glad you said that. Not just for those that have kids with different abilities, but just period for parents. For parents to hear that. Stop. I would say handicapping your own child. Stop, because they can do what you think they can't do, but because sometimes we think, well, they can't do it, they can't say this, they can't do this math project or this science project or whatever it is. I'll do it, or I'll help them do it. How will they ever learn how to do it?
They won't.
They won't. So, listening audience, today we have the fabulous Lakisha Louissiant in the chair today on In the Chair with Pastor L. Well, we've talked about so many things. I want to go into his schooling. How was it having a child, what they say, has autism, going into the school system, with the paperwork and all the things you have to do, how was that process for you and for the family?
In the beginning, it wasn't stressful because I didn't have the knowledge that I needed to go in and understand what to sign and what not to sign. So it wasn't hard in the beginning because anything they gave me, I would sign it and agree with it. And he had a wonderful teacher for 2 years. He had a wonderful teacher who always told me, keep teaching. And you keep teaching until the light switch comes on. You never stop teaching because somewhere on the inside of him, he's listening. He's listening to what you're saying, so keep teaching. So that was the best teacher my child could have ever had, and I was so grateful to have him as my son's teacher because he understood, since he had a child that had a different ability. After that teacher left, it was a battlefield because I went to go major, I enrolled into college for collaborative education, which is special education. I began learning about IEPs and what the parent is supposed to do, and I started learning about my rights, and I started researching what were my rights as a parent and what was his right as a child or a student in school. And once I gained that knowledge, it became more so a battlefield versus being there for the child. So the school systems, they don't like for parents to have knowledge of different things because now they have to go in and they have to give that child what they're supposed to give them. But for 3 years, my son sat in a classroom, and all he did was write on a whiteboard and play with Play-Doh. And this went on for years, so I never really saw them teach him. And I stayed at the school almost every day. I would always go to the school to check in on him. And once I stopped signing every paper they gave me, the attitudes towards me from the IEP team, it was totally different because now we're working with the parent that knows her rights. So we went on for that, and I remember he was in the 3rd grade going on to the 4th grade, and the teacher said, he was in the 4th grade, I think 3rd or 4th going on to the 5th, and the teacher said to me, well, he can't learn, he can't read. We're having to work with him on his level. And I said, okay. And so over the summer I came home and I purchased me a whiteboard and some markers, and I drew a circle on the board, and I said to my baby, I said, every word you get right, you'll get an I, another I, a nose, and then you'll get a smile, and you'll have a good job written up under there. So my son learned 30 words at home by me teaching him. I wrote up everything in documentation. I presented it to the school and said, okay, this is what I did over the summer. Here are the results. I took the board to the school, and I wrote on the board, and I let my son do that very thing in front of them. So now they can't say he can't learn. They have to teach him. Still didn't work. So as I said before, IEP meetings became a battlefield because if a school does not want to give you something for your child and it's his right, they will not do it. So it was not easy going into the school system with my child. And after, him having a black eye in the school system and never knowing what happened and, coming up missing when he was in kindergarten and found by another parent, there are so many different things that happened along the way that frustrated me so bad, and that made me question a lot of things, with God as well, even in that time. So when he entered into the school system, that was just another issue for me to just go to God about because I was frustrated as to why was it happening. He's a sweet, innocent child who does those things to a child.
That's a lot. I hate to hear that that's what you went through. I'm glad that you have taken your story and all the transitions you've had to go through and learned your rights, learned his rights. For those that may not know what an IEP is, can you explain what that is?
An IEP is an individualized education program, and it's something that's developed for children who enter into special education. It determines their curriculum. It determines the services that will be provided to them. It plays a big role for that child for that school year. And if the IEP is not written correctly, then your child will not get what they are supposed to have. Say, for instance, if they're transitioning, they have to give those transitioning services. If they need electronics or Braille or different things like that, that IEP is basically the contract for what the school has to do. They have to honor that because that's the program in which the child is working under. And if they don't apply what they're supposed to, then the school can, get in trouble for those things. But the IEP is basically a contract between the parent and the school for that student to assure that the parent will get, that the child will get everything that he needs and all of the services that he's required to get.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. For those that may not know what an IEP is, they have an understanding of what it is now. Now, you're an advocate for child and parent rights. What does an advocate do? Or what is it that, first I'm going to ask, what does an advocate do? And then you can tell me what it is that you do specifically.
Okay, an advocate is basically a voice. That's what an advocate is. An advocate stands in and speaks on behalf of an individual to help them to understand the right way to do things and the process to do them. And for me, as an advocate, what I do is I go in and I help parents to understand each process that they have to go through, and I help them to understand that there's a chain of command that they must follow in order to get things done properly. I help them to know about documentation and how important documentation is, because it's easy to have a conversation with a staff member at the school for your child, and then hearsay comes into play whenever you try to request something or say this is what was supposed to be given to me. Documentation is your contract. You've written out everything. They signed it stating they received it. Now you have your proof. I explain to people how important it is to record conversations or IEP meetings when it pertains to their child in school, because documentation and recordings eliminate all hearsay. But at the same time, you have to let them know that all calls or all IEP meetings are recorded. And so I explain to them different things they need to know before they go into an IEP meeting so that they're prepared. Because schools have attorneys that prepare them. And if we don't have attorneys, we have to prepare ourselves by researching the information. And I think that's where a lot of parents fail at being advocates for their children, because reality is a lot of parents, either they don't know how to or they just choose not to. And for the ones that don't know how to, I educate them on how to do it. And for the ones that don't want to, you can't make them do it. So therefore their child slips through the system and never learns anything and never even earns a diploma. Because children who have different abilities that are in special education up under AAA, they don't receive a high school diploma. They receive a certificate that states they were in school for 12 years. They don't receive a diploma. My child will not receive a diploma unless I can have him taken off of AAA. Now, once he's taken off of AAA, then he would have to, go through the courses that other students go through and take the same classes. But my son may not receive a diploma. If he's never taken off of AAA, he won't receive a diploma. All he'll receive is something that stated he has completed the time of duration of being in school. And that's where the sad part comes in. And that's why they're not really able to get jobs, because they don't have the diploma they need. And many of those parents have no clue because they have not sat down and dissected the IEP to see what it is that their children will receive.
You just said something about them going to get jobs, obtaining jobs, and moving on further, in their life, and them not being able to obtain that because they don't have a diploma. Now, Are you a part of an autistic community, so to speak? Or do you know people that have kids that are older that have autism?
I know kids that are older that have autism, and I actually know kids that are older that have cerebral palsy or whatever different ability that they may have. And many of those children, they didn't receive a diploma. What they do is they'll work in a cafeteria in the lunchroom to help out with taking out trash or preparing food. But as far as getting a corporate job or, a really good job, many of them may never have that opportunity because reality is a lot of people who have different abilities are discriminated against in so many different ways. And it's vital for parents to know Section 504, understand and know that right, because Section 504 was put in place so that they can't be discriminated against because of their disability. And if you don't know that, it's easy to sit back and allow your child to sit at home and receive a disability check for the rest of their lives.
Well, I would like to ask you to speak to our listening audience for those that have just found out that their child is autistic or have a different ability. For those families, what could you say? What would you say to that person that's listening and they heard their story through you, and they're saying, "Oh my God, I am not alone." What could you say to them to give them, some information or some hope to keep on doing what it is that they're doing?
The first thing is speak life into your child. Never tell your child that they are not capable of doing anything. Never allow anyone to tell your child that they are not capable of doing anything. Your child can do as much as anyone else. Let their imagination take them into places where they see themselves being able to do whatever they want to do. And once they've tricked their minds and you've helped to trick their minds, then you will be amazed at the things they can do. And I understand and I know it hurts having a child that has a different ability, but there is hope, and it starts with you. Don't allow them to get away with needing someone else to be a crutch to help them to do whatever it is they need to do. Teach them how to do it on their own. And what they can't do, then you help them to do. Understand and know your rights and your child's rights. Research and dissect everything you can in order to help your child, because if you don't help them, then there's no one there that's going to be able to help them like mama or help them like daddy, because you can sympathize since you live with that child every single day. Just believe, trust, and have faith, and know that if God can do that for me, for my child who didn't even speak for 7.5 years, He can do it for anybody. And I know it hurts. And if you have to cry it out, cry it out. But don't allow your child to see you hurting. You love them and show them that there's greatness on the inside of them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with our listening audience. As I said before, audience, we have today Lakisha Louissiant in the co-host chair. She has given us so much information, and I'm just glad to have her on. But since we've talked about autism, I would like to know, what are you doing now in your ministry to continue to champion this cause?
What